sticky side, real quick, write your name and the church you're from. First name is fine. Name and church you're from, sticky side, sticky side, sticky side, name and church you're from. We're going to be fast here, people. Some of the girls from church. On the other side, I want you to write two things, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds to do it. So be fast, but be smart and legible. Two things. When it comes to youth and children's ministry, one thing I'd like to know more about is. And the second thing, on the non-sticky side now, because you got your name and your church on the sticky side. When it comes to youth and children's ministry, our church could really teach other churches a thing or two about such and such. Maybe you're great at recruiting teachers. Maybe you've got teachers who just have a heart of love for teenagers, heart of love for kids. Maybe you've only got 2 kids in your church, but you got a really clean craft closet. You all got something that you could teach somebody, and you all got at least one thing you want to learn. Write those down. You only got 30 seconds left. One thing you want to learn, one thing you can teach. Fifteen seconds. All right, time. Put your pencils down. Pass it back to the outside. If I could have a brother or sister collect those right now. I want to see a show of hands real quick because I'm new to this area and I know you don't know me, and unfortunately I don't know many of you nearly as well as I would like. Would like to get a sense for where your churches are at. I pastor a small congregation, so I want to see a show of hands right now. Are a part of churches that have, on average, worship attendance, now don't lie, we're in church, about 50 people or less. Show of hands, about 50 or less. Okay, great, thanks. Roughly 50 to 100. That's me too. Okay, great. 100 to 200. Okay, great. More than 200. How many roughly? Give me a ballpark. 210. About 215. Gotta get 220, 220, 220. Okay. Next one. Thank you. This just helps me know who I'm talking to. This is, how would you grade or how would you assess the state of your youth ministry? Now, we're not talking about kids not in high school. We're talking about folks in 9th through 12th grade. If you include a junior high in that, that's fine, 7th through 12. How would you describe the state of your youth ministry right now? Show of hands. How many of you would say it's absolutely great? Show of hands. Thank you for being honest. I didn't expect that. How many of you would say it's pretty good? About half. Okay. How many of you would say it needs help? A little more than half. How many of you would say what youth ministry? All right. Now we're talking about children's ministry. Same questions. How many of you would say your children's ministry, it's hard to know how to improve. Things are great. Oh, man. Great. Thank you for being honest. Number 2, how many of you would say children's ministry pretty good? Okay, more though if you say that with children and with teenagers. Needs help? What children's ministry? Okay, so maybe a little more help need with teenagers. Listen, if you have questions related about this presentation, I want you just to ask as we go. Feel free to interrupt me. Several people have asked if is this PowerPoint going to be made available, and the answer is yes. We will find a way to get it to you and make it available. If you have questions that are related to the presentation, stop me. If you have questions that aren't related to the presentation, I will be glad to take those at a break, and we will talk about, not at a break between sessions, but during the session when I'm done doing this, we'll open up the floor for some general Q&A. Youth and children's ministry is a huge topic, and as a part of our time today, I want to be really clear about what we're doing and what we're not doing as a part of this time. So I want to tell you what this session is not. This session is not about resources. I know there are tons of them out there. I know they're hard to keep track of. This session is not about how to navigate the resources. This session is not about volunteers. That is how to recruit teachers and break arms non-violently to recruit people and teach in Sunday school. This is not about decor, what color choice do kids like these days. This is not about specific program ideas necessarily, where they say, how can I sort of kind of add to my bag of tricks? It's not about money. I'm not going to tell you how to raise money for your group. And it's also not about legality. How do I not get sued? And where I have to keep the windows and what sign and what sign. How many? But I do want to see this. Show of hands. How many of you need help in any one of these areas? Okay. Of those of you who need help in this area, all these are legitimate. All this is a part of youth and children's ministry. If you need help in these areas, and I'm serious, I'm not joking. How many of you have called your district executive? If you need help in these areas, call Becky Ullum in Elgin. If you need help in these areas, especially with relation to teenagers, call Russell Haish, Bethany Seminary, smart guy. Read books on these topics. They're out there. I know they're overwhelming, and I know there is a bunch of them. There are books that can speak to those things better than I can. I hope that those of you who want to learn, even if things are going great, I hope that there are churches in your area that you don't view as competitors, but you view as people who would cooperate and work with God's kingdom. Cold call those people and say, I would like to buy your lunch and buy your coffee because you seem to have a good youth group. Don't hate them because they're successful. Don't worship them because they're successful. Buy their coffee. Learn. Right? Jesus, our rabbi, is going to speak to you when you talk to them. So learn from those books. Read whatever books. And sometimes I have to find, sometimes education is really just a matter of motivation. So if you need to learn that stuff, go after it. Go get it. And there are people out there who are better at it than I am. What am I going to talk about? This presentation is about culture change. Now, I would have to say, not the change in the broader culture, but change in congregational culture. I hope we think about the culture of our particular congregations. I want you to learn about the culture of children and families and teenagers in your area, because your area is different than my area. Your area might be different than the person sitting right next to you. What we want to do is we want to learn how to change your church's culture to strengthen our ministry with youth and with children. It applies to so many other things. Youth and children is just one. So we say culture. What do we mean by culture? This is what I mean. Let me give you an example. True story. Church in Florida experienced a growth spurt. They ended up attracting a lot of families with children. They were not prepared. And I remember Fred Bernard told me years ago, growth always creates problems. Decline creates problems, but growth creates problems too. The question is, what kind of problems do you want to have? Okay? And so they grew. They weren't expecting it. Immediately, it had an impact on their facilities. They could tell just by looking at the building that they had more kids and more families in than they had expected. Clarifier, there's no vandalism. Nobody's destroying things intentionally. They're not being destructive. It is wear and tear accelerated by the fact that they have more kids. So the church board met. They said, in order to keep things from getting out of hand, in order to keep things from getting out of control, we had better do something. So what they did was this. All over the church, they put up signs that said, the children are wrecking the building. Praise God. Now, you tell me, what else could they have done? Just shout it out. What else could they have done? They could have started, they could have put up a list of rules. No horseplay. Right? Okay. What else could they have done?
No skateboarding.
No skateboarding. What else could they have done?
If you've got to make that mess, take it outside.
No running. What?
If you've got to make that mess, take it outside.
If you've got to make that mess, take it outside. Right. Now, what sort of message would it have sent if they'd have put up signs that said no horseplay? If they'd have put up signs that said if you're going to make a mess, take it outside? In my opinion, that's just my opinion. If you tell kids not to run in church, they'll run right out the door. Ma'am?
I was going to say, make room for more.
Make room for more. What would have happened if the church board said, well, okay, we want the kids, but we don't want people to get mad, so what should we do? And we're going to wring our hands, and we're going to accommodate the most brittle personalities in our church. What they did with the signs and with the message was they clarified and communicated the kind of culture they wanted to have. Not a preservation culture, not a control culture, a kid culture. And I tell you this, brothers and sisters, and I tell you this with passion and with love, not just as an expert necessarily. I'm here because I'm there, because I have been where you are at in some cases, and you have been where I'm at. I just happen to be the guy at this point behind the microphone. It is not the job of the kids to keep your committees happy. It is the job of our committees and the job of our church to do meaningful ministry with teenagers, with children, to reach them with the good news of Jesus Christ. It's not their job to make our job easier. We signed up for the difficult job of reaching them with the good news of Jesus Christ. Is it worth it?
Yes.
You might say, we have a vision statement, or we have a mission statement, or we have goals, or we're going to have 42 vision and committee meetings where we write out this nice document of all the things that we're going to do with you. We have strategies. Why do we need to talk about culture? Here's why we need to talk about culture. Because culture eats vision for breakfast. Culture eats goals for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Do I like vision? Do I like strategies? Do I like committees? Sometimes, yes, I like all those things. But if you have a culture that says, I don't really want those kids doing that, you can have all the goals you want, and you probably will not meet them, or you will be met with conflict at every single turn, and you will undercut yourself. And we will preserve our churches into oblivion. That's why I say, is vision important? Absolutely. Goals important? Absolutely. Strategy important? Absolutely. So is culture. And you'll find yourself, if you set certain goals, you're going to be at war with your own culture in your church. Now, here's the thing about culture. It's not written down anywhere. It's not in your bylaws. It's a kind of undocumented, unwritten rules. People in your church might not even be aware of it. Now, if you're a smart pastor, you're a smart leader, you're aware of it. You know what it is. I want to talk for just a second about culture. There's lots of different ways to do that. When I say culture, I don't necessarily mean race or ethnicity. These are some of my forefathers. These are some of my foremothers. This is an honest genealogical photo of folks. I'm from the Midwest. These people live in the Midwest. They have the same faith as me, in many cases the same denomination as me. This is my flesh and blood. But it is a different culture than me. Are you with me? Okay. There are lots of different ways to think and talk about culture. Here are just 4 ways. Got this from a guy named Pastor Doug. He stole it from a book on anthropology. V-A-T-T, VAT. The V stands for values, and that just simply asks the question, what is important? Certainly includes biblical values, certainly includes Christian values, but more than that, let me give you an example. When I first walked onto the property at Covington Community Church of the Brethren outside Seattle, where I work now, oldest building in Covington, 25 broken windows. Not vandalism, neglect. In the same period of time that they amassed 25 broken windows, they also amassed 106 memorial plaques. What does that tell you about what is important to that group of people?
History.
Okay? We have official values that we write down and we say this is what we are about. But what we live by are our operational values. Do you see the difference? Yeah. Because when I went there and said, do you want to do ministry with kids? They said, absolutely. And the children's classroom was the only one that didn't have heat, and it was the only one with shards of glass on the floor. Brethren, people, we should be leading the way in this. Our values are what we care enough to do something about, not lip service. Second aspect of culture, aesthetics. I don't know if you can see that picture or not. The young woman is from Africa. She has participated in what's called ritual scarification. She's done that to make herself more beautiful because in her culture, that's what beauty is. She did this to appear more beautiful. And I think that aesthetic, depending on your culture, depending on where you're at, how your area defines aesthetic, is one of the most powerful and most overlooked aspects of culture. Let me tell you another true story. There's one church that had written in their bylaws, they actually had written this part down, that teaching music appreciation was going to be a part of their church's ministry. And by music appreciation, they meant traditional, classically trained Western European music. Now, I go to symphonies, and I like that stuff too, so don't tell me I don't like those, okay? Just telling you a story. Music appreciation was part of their ministry, and I have to say, for a long time, that worked like a charm. So long as they had a steady stream of well-educated white people who like classical music coming in the door. Okay? But when the neighborhood around the church building began to change and be made up of Hispanic, Asian, white, working class, working poor people, they had a very hard time because they expected those people to undergo a second conversion. First one to Jesus, second one to classical. Or, more likely, first one to classical, second one to Jesus. Now, I don't hate classical music, don't tell me I don't like it. I just love Jesus more. Third thing, thinking. What is common sense? And this is not just intellect, but this is attitudes and assumptions and presuppositions. How many of you know that common sense is not common? Okay? If you want an illustration of this, ask 10 people to clean a room for you. You'll get 10 different versions of cleaning. Okay? It's different depending on culture. I took a group of teenagers to National Youth Conference several years ago. One family was a family that was on the fringes of the church. Parents would never come. Kids would come sometimes. Brothers and sisters. Oh my. They averaged a wild, screaming meltdown every 2 or 3 days. I'm talking about teenagers here. They would yell, they would cry, they would throw things. And after a while, they'd calm down, feel better, act like nothing happened. Now, you've got to understand, I didn't see this coming at all. So, oh, could have had a blow up. Oh, another blow up. And there's 2 siblings doing this, and they're doing this maybe every other day. Now, for them, that was a normal way of dealing with stress because that's what their dad did. That's what their mom did. Explode, feel better, act like nothing happened. Some of us got deacons that do that. That was common sense to them. It made sense for the family that they came from, and it had an impact on the culture of the youth group. Because it wasn't just them as individuals doing that. They came out of their culture and they carried that culture into ours. Pray without ceasing. Final T in the back is tools, which is what gets the job done. Technology. What that is really just the explosion of new tools. Doesn't mean we know how to use them. Doesn't mean we always should use them. But they're tools. The question is, what gets the job done? And that's why we have to talk and think about tools. Because you ever heard that phrase, if all you got is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail? That's right. I don't care what tool you use. Man, you can use Stone Age tools or Space Age tools. Use what works for your culture. Whatever gets the job done, I don't care. It can be a rock or a Mac. I don't care. Use what builds God's kingdom in your context. How do you know you're in a kid-friendly environment? Just shout it out. Anyway, just forget about church for a second. How do you know you're in a kid-friendly environment? Anybody?
They show up.
There are kids there. Great. Okay. What else? What?
Wow. Activity.
Joyful.
Mess.
It's loud. Yes, there's activity. Yes, what else?
Joy.
Kids are
They're happy.
Kids are happy.
Laughter.
Or when they break down screaming and have a meltdown, right? Then it's okay. And the adults don't scream. Because that's what kids do. Yeah, okay. Well, how do you know you're in a kid-friendly environment?
The kids show up.
It let kids be kids, and kids show up. Right? You know. How many of you are parents? Quick show of hands. Grandparents, right? You go to kid-friendly environments. You go to the play area at McDonald's. You go to the park. You take your kids to Little League. Okay? You know what it's like to be in a kid-friendly environment. Make your church a kid-friendly environment. You have more expertise than you know. You have more experience than you know. How do you know you're in a teen-friendly environment? How do you know you're in a teen-friendly environment? Yes, Chuck, well, that's fine. They show up. What are the components of that environment?
They can say wild things and people don't get shocked.
They can say wild things and people don't get shocked. I know that none of you said wild things when you were teenagers. I understand that. It's totally different now. They dress and look differently. I will tell you this. Ministry with teenagers is cross-cultural ministry. They can be the same area as you. They can be the same race as you. They can speak the same language as you. Treat them as though they are a part of our culture, and they are also, in a way, their own culture. If you view it in that sense, life will get a whole lot easier for you. Is your church willing to be a kid-friendly environment? Is your church willing to be a teen-friendly environment? I was an expert on parenting. I mean, an expert on parenting until I had a kid. Got a 3-year-old boy named Gavin. He's all boy. He loves barbecue and construction equipment. Brisket, Dad. He asked me if you go out for brisket. 3-year-old. He hates hamburgers. But do you think I'm going to take that kid to any place where we walk in the door and somebody freaks out because he runs, or freaks out because he's loud, or freaks out because he throws things on the floor, and then somebody else comes up after and said, okay, I'm sorry, Brother Bob or Sister Sally freaked out about you. We want to be a kid-friendly environment. It doesn't matter what you say. I mean, there's nothing they can say to undo the message that I got that my kid isn't welcome. No, it's fine. We'll just go someplace else. And folks, and listen, I'm willing to take hits for the team. I'm willing to be in church contexts where people do and say goofy things. Sometimes it's just bad social skills. Sometimes we're all learning. We're all on the journey. We all make mistakes. But I'm willing to take a hit for the team because I love Jesus. People who are trying to decide whether or not they love Jesus, people who are trying to stop loving sin and figure out what's right with their life, they might not be so willing to take a hit for the team. You know what I'm saying? Everybody says they want to reach kids. Everybody says that. Including the church with 25 broken windows and glass on the floor of the children's classroom. So I think most of our churches just flat aren't going far enough. I want to give you a real/fake case study, okay? This is a story about a real church, and at a certain point in the story I'm going to stop, and we're going to go from real story into pretend story. We're going to have fun with this, okay? This is what we're going to do. Real story of a real church, Eastlake Christian Church, Seattle suburb, less than 10 years old, primarily young people, over 2,000 people involved in this church. Okay? They got some strengths, they got some weaknesses. They're not perfect like everybody else. Young staff, very young. They show lots of video, lots of irreverent humor. They're very, very funny. Loads of technology. They're located right beside Microsoft. Okay? Culture. They're using technology. Out the wazoo. They serve extremely high quality coffee. Right? They're going to recarpet the place. You know how they did carpet selection? They put 3 carpet samples out. We did this too when we replaced our 3 carpet samples out and a pot of coffee. And just dump the coffee on all 3 samples. Okay, you can't tell on that one. We're going to Right? We did the same thing, man. We replaced we got the property guy, 74 years old. He said, I got my pot of coffee right here. You dump it on there. Right? This church, fast-paced, high-energy service. They also have Seattle Seahawks and football fans out there. They got a lot of Seahawks players go to this church. So what do you think they do when they got big games going on? They just have an evening service, man. They show the game on the big screen because they're pulling for their brothers. who were in there that this is how they, listen, they're not all fun and games though. They do throw a lot of parties, they're known for that. They have an incredible long-term ministry, emphasis on young men struggling with pornography addiction. And they are completely bold and straightforward about all of that. They have raised water to drill wells in third world countries, millions and millions of dollars. One of the things they're known for is 3 loud songs. That's literally in their tagline because they want to connect with people outside the church. People outside the church don't know what to expect when they walk in the door. So you can expect this, a message, and offering 3 loud songs. And when they say 3 loud songs, they mean 3 loud songs. Now, I'm not joking. You're going to think I am. I'm not the pretend part yet. They stocked their welcome desk with earplugs. Okay? There's some folks in my congregation now. Before they came to my congregation, they were shopping around for a church. Amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. They tried out this church. They went there. They couldn't go because it set off his pacemaker. Now, all that is true, okay? That's 100% true. Now we're going to go to the pretend part, okay? Ready? Pretend part, pretend part. Imagine if this church says, we are worried that we are not reaching all generations. In fact, we want to reach the older generation. We're extremely worried our church is lopsided. We've got too many young people, not enough older people. What do old people care about these days? Okay, I'm in the pretend part, and you gotta have a sense of humor with me. So imagine that they want to build a strategy to reach old people. And that they have hired us to be their consultants. They've built a strategy. You are the consultants for this strategy. So let me share with you this 3-part strategy you can use to reach old people. Strategy number 1, once a month we will have an organ solo. Don't laugh, it's a big sacrifice for us. We're used to 3 loud songs. We are giving up a lot of ground. Okay? And if we play too much of that organ music, the young people are just going to go. So we don't want to go too fast. First thing we're going to do, organ solo once a month. Second thing we're going to do, we're going to build a special area off to the side for old people to sit. Because we heard old people, they like to sit down. We've got rocking chairs, doilies. We don't know any old people, but we heard they like doilies. And we're going to buy a china set. And we know they're just going to come because once a month we got an organ solo and a china set. Okay? We're even going to hire a staff person. We're very committed to this. We're going to hire a staff person to reach old people. This is him. This is our senior, not senior pastor, but you know what we mean, senior pastor. We can't put a lot of money on this, so he will work 2.5 hours a week, and he will help us reach the older generations for Christ. Now, oh consultants, oh experts, what do you think? Will this work or not? No. But do you people have no faith? You don't know. Right there. Why will this not work, consultants? Why will this not work, consultants? Speak to an older person. What?
Can't relate.
We're gonna wheel in one older person to talk to our committee. Okay?
It's not real.
It's not real. It's not.
This is lip service.
It's stereotypical. It's lip service.
The culture is still too diverse.
We spent a year on this strategy. You didn't talk to your grandma. What? My grandma lives in another part of the country. I'm just going to Skype with grandma for 5 minutes, and we'll build our strategy around that 5-minute conversation.
She doesn't have a computer.
She doesn't. Yeah, sister.
It doesn't address the older people's real needs, and they'll still feel like
They gotta sit
foreigners.
down. They have to sit. That's a real need.
Yeah, but they have deeper needs than that.
Oh.
And coming into it's still such a foreign culture for them that it probably wouldn't be appealing anyway.
Okay, so let's say they tried these 3 things, and then they brought you back in for an evaluation after it crashed and burned terribly. And what if they said, you know, we don't understand. Help us understand why this didn't work. We did 3 things. I know it's not a lot to you, but to us as a church it was a lot. We gave up a lot of ground for these 3 things. What would you say to them if some of them said, you know, we're actually pretty frustrated with this thing. We might just throw in the towel with old person's ministry because it sounds to me like old people just want to be entertained. Listen, if once a month organ solo is not enough, it must be because they want to be entertained. Sir.
Then you go to the other side of the coin. That's why young people come to the entertainment music.
Well, listen, the young people are here for the worship, because this is where how normal people worship. But old people, we tried the demographic thing, we're just trying to make this all work. They love Lawrence well, okay? Once a month we can do Lawrence well, and that should be enough.
I would disagree though from one point, because about half of those old people probably like the young music as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we just pretend case study. Yeah. Hey, listen, the older folks that ended up in my congregation, right? His pacemaker got set off, but they tried that church before they tried mine. What would you do if the committee came to you and said, but we want this to work, but we love what we love? Old people? I mean, I know they smell funny, but we love them. We are friendly, but we just can't handle church over old people.
First of all, what do you classify as an old person?
45. What you're picking up on is that my language, and of course I'm doing this to play, right? But what I'm doing is, what I'm revealing is that my language is unintentionally, narrow and offensive. And I don't even hear it. I don't even realize it. What do old people want these days?
It needs to be age challenged, not old.
What would you do if you came back to the committee and the committee said, well, we just think old people these days aren't interested in Jesus. They're just not interested in God. If they didn't respond to our strategy, that must mean that they are spiritually disinterested. Sister.
I was just going to say, sometimes don't expect them to come to you, go to them. Why not go change your ministry to a nursing ministry or come out of church and learn how to relate to them?
There are no relationships in this strategy. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it is informed by 0 relationships, and it leads to 0 relationships. Now, Eastlake Christian Church, everything in their church has been geared and engineered to reach young people. They don't have a young adult ministry. They are a young adult ministry. Their church has been engineered to reach who they already have. Everything about it. And many of us in our churches have been engineered to reach who we already have. That's right. For some of our churches, we don't have a senior adult ministry. We are a senior adult ministry. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Because those forefathers, those foremothers, those brothers and sisters have taught me a lot and they have brought me along. But if we want to do youth and children's ministry, it's going to take more than doing 1 or 2 strategies and then get discouraged when they don't work. Is it going to be hard? Yes, it's going to be hard. I'll tell you right now. Yes, hard. Get over it. Okay? Some people not going to like it. That's fine. Let me tell you about that. And in some cases, this is why we haven't done it already. That's right. It is painful. Yes, it's painful. Who wants to say, how are you going to sell it to your church if you stand up and say, we would like to initiate culture change in a way that many of us are not going to like? It's going to be very painful. I want to give you some good stories. What I think of as incomplete list of some practical tools and tips and some good stories. Take a look here. There we go. We'll just stay there. An incomplete list of practical tips. Do a neighborhood audit if you haven't done that already. Now don't sequester yourself in the committee for 3 years when you should be getting out into the community, okay? But get out there and learn. Your neighborhood's different than my neighborhood. They're all different, okay? Do a neighborhood audit. Find out, tell me what, you can be an expert in your community. I'm not going to be an expert in your community, you are. And then do a church audit. And that question is, who are we really? Not who we say we are on paper. How do we live? Where do we put our priorities into action? Do a neighborhood audit. Do a church audit. Okay? Some of us, I have to say, do not need another navel-gazing church study. We do not need to do another survey. But if you haven't done something like that, you ought to do that. And the cultures are different. You will sometimes find that there's a cultural disconnect between your church and your community. And the cultures themselves are different across communities. If you find that the culture of your church is different than the culture of the community, you are now engaged in cross-cultural ministry. It doesn't matter if they're the same race as you or they speak the same language as you. It is a different culture. So do a neighborhood audit, do a church audit, and build capacity if you're in revitalization mode. If everything's going fine, you're needing work, that's fine. But if your church needs to be in turnaround mode, accept the fact that you're not normal. I grew up in a normal, healthy church. We did all this stuff. That's a normal, healthy church. You're doing turnaround church, you're in turnaround mode. If you're in turnaround mode, everything you do needs to be done with a focus on turnaround. Not on being the church of your childhood. Not on being the church of somebody else's childhood. You're in turnaround mode. That affects everything in your church. It's the rule of thumb with organizations is if an organization starts to be in trouble, you know what percentage of the resources that they have to apply to the turnaround sustained over a period of years? What percentage? 30%. It's not going to work to put $5 in the budget towards this thing and hope it just goes. 30%. They said that in Elgin 10 years ago. That 30% of our resources, not just money, 1 out of every 3 conversations is about turning this thing around. 1 out of every 3 meetings is about reaching out to our neighborhood and not just doing the same things that we've always done. I've had people tell me, back in the day, we used to get 1 phone call and 50 teenagers came. Awesome. Great. That's where we want to be. But you didn't get there automatically. That had to get built up to. And if you're not there, and you want to get there, that has to get built up to. That means you're going to have to make 5 times as many invitations as you think you are. That means you're going to have to make 10 times as many phone calls as you think you are. This is a whole lot of work. Yes, a lot of work. Right. Right. Church death is easy. It is not a normal job. It is a turnaround job, and it requires more effort, more fire, more hunger. So build capacity. Reinforce the culture. And there's some of us, and I'll just say this straight out because I've gone through the fire in this, man. And when I was in Indiana, I was a nice guy. And I was doing nice guy change agency because we weren't absolutely on the ropes yet. And I put my arm around people and said, let's just, a degree at a time, take some steps in the right direction. And recruit people. There are times when I've trained people, and I mean professionals, smart people, committed people. And I've trained and trained and trained and trained for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and one person who doesn't know church and just got to know Jesus, but who has the spiritual gifts we need walked in the door, problem solved. So the answer isn't always whipping the people you have into shape. It is following the Great Commission and the gifts come. Church planners say, the resources are in the harvest. And be unique. That's the best thing I can tell you, man. Be unique. I'll tell you a critical aspect of our children's ministry is a man by the name of Richard Inch. That's a great name for a contractor, Inch. 74 years old, got a beat-up old truck, and he is full of tools. He's also, in addition to being a contractor, he used to be a teacher. And we're on a wooded plot of land. We've got, I don't know, not a lot of kids right now, but we've 17 signed up for a thing that we're doing right now, so a decent group of kids. And whenever we have an event at the church, in barrels Rich with his truckload of tools. And he's already got pre-cut birdhouses the kids can make. He brings out a stump of wood with rusty nails and hammers, and the kids are going crazy, and they're pounding the nails into this thing. It is as low-tech as you can get. And if I tried to take that away from the kids, they would run me out of town. Okay? That's how much they love Rich. They know he loves them. And one guy and a truckload of tools is a critical part of our children's ministry. How is that possible? So simple, brethren. So simple. There's nothing to it. It's not hard. And I'm not sure it would work everywhere, and it works like a charm for us. Be unique. I'm not seeing what we could do is we could send him all over the country and have him show up with his truckload of tools. But it might not work for you. Be unique. Do what works in your context. I want to tell you some good stories, some more good things that have happened. Pastor in Grand Rapids. This is an amazing story. Good-sized church. I was there over 4th of July weekend. No child care that day. So the kids are just running all over the place. This is what the pastor says when he stands up. He says, okay, we have as you can see, we have no child care today. I want you to turn to the parent next to you and say, it's okay. And then it went from being a tense environment where the kids are making noise to everybody laughs, but the pastor had to give them permission. They weren't there until he said, look at your neighbor and say, it's okay. He preached on a number of things. He preached on a text, I don't remember where it was, but it ended where it just talked about how we're God's children. How many of us have heard that time and time and time again? We don't even think about it anymore. What did he do at the end of the message? He had all the kids, not in child care, come up to the platform, and he said, turn out there and look at your parents. And he said, parents, I wish you could see your faces right now. Oh, the kids can't sit still. They're moving around. The blonde curls going all over the place, and they're falling off the stage. And the parent, and I'm not even my kids, right? I'm beaming. And he says, your beaming face is how God looks at you, and that's what it means that you are God's child. Now here's somebody who took no child care that day, and you turn it into a biblical teaching and the kind of culture that accepts kids and no money involved. You can do this. There's no money, there's no toys. Church I worked at in Fort Wayne, Indiana, had a half daycare program that had been there a long time. Great ministry, declined. It needed to die. It did. Went to city planning. I was 19 years old, didn't know what I was doing. Looking through books, found out my neighborhood was considered a recreationally deficient zone. I see kids going around and what are those? Inline skates were really big then. And so, man, we're just going to start a street hockey ministry. Big, ugly orange sign. Ugly. Ugly. Free street hockey is all it said. Put up signs. We also found that we were close to one of the biggest food banks in the nation, second only to Los Angeles, California. So I started to go over there and get free snacks for teenagers because it was cheap. And then, over time, this evolves into an after-school program, and I mean over a period of years, called the Blue Jean Diner. I worked there. My wife also worked there. At our peak, we were running maybe 70 kids in an after-school program. And when we left that congregation, we left them with a grant from a local dance company who wanted to do taiko drumming because we as a church had been able to assemble kids that hadn't been served by other populations. How do we do that? I walk around the neighborhood and I see kids in inline skates. I look across the street and there's a big food bank. I go over, I walk across the room and find out who they are and what they're doing, and it builds up over a period of years. Now, did a lot of those kids end up in the church? No, they didn't. My uncle's a pastor in rural Ohio, and he says, man, if I could just have one good contact with a kid, the whole family comes. He said, I bet it's the same way for you. Never. Different place, right? Different culture. What we did grow with were adults who said, I love what you're doing, and I'm willing to join your church, to join in your mission. We found the people who are served are often willing to be served ad infinitum. And they don't always move from servees to servants. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In our context, we grew with people who had a servant's heart, who wanted to join us in the process of serving. Right now, the congregation I work with has a co-op preschool that meets in the Christian education building next door. They rent it out to the co-op preschool. No kids in the church, 90 families a week in the preschool. I went to the board, I said, "Ever invite those people to church?" They said, "No, we're mad because they never come." Christians, the onus is on us. The onus is on us to go, not for them to come. So they had actually an antagonistic relationship with the preschool. Not only that, they hadn't kept track of the finances at all, so they were actually losing money on the preschool, being antagonistic toward the preschool, so they were losing money and not making friends. So I went over and said, "Hi, I'm pastor, I'd like to be friends and double your rent, but I still want to be your friend." Same director for 33 years. She's been steering people away from that church for a long time because the church did not have a good relationship with her, and they resented the fact that they were on the property. Meet with them in committee, they tell you they want to do stuff with kids. So somebody in the church worked with refugees at the time, worked at a place, and somebody else worked at IKEA. You know, IKEA, they get gingerbread houses on the cheap. And I said, I don't know what we're doing, we're just going to wing this, but you can get gingerbread houses for free, for cheap. Get them. Just get 50. I don't know. Just get 50. And we got all these 90 families a week at the co-op preschool. We're going to have an event. We're going to call it a gingerbread housewarming. We're going to collect donations for refugees. The kids are going to meet in the basement of the church. We're going to put together gingerbread, which smells really good. And we've begun slowly to repair that relationship. We had to have 2 seatings this time because we had too many kids. 70-some kids show up to that time. The first 2 years ago when we did it, it was the first joint event between the preschool and the church ever in 33 years. Who are the people in your neighborhood, and how are you meeting them? I don't know if you can see this. Upper left-hand corner. What is that? Stained glass window. Lower right-hand corner. Can you see what that is? You see the hand smudge there? What is that? Upper left-hand corner, that is a stained glass window. Lower right-hand corner, stained glass window. Upper left-hand corner, I love those stained glass windows. I've been all over the world, I've seen them. I love them, they're beautiful. Don't tell me I don't love beauty, because I do. But if we want to reach kids and we want to reach teenagers, acknowledging the beauty of the upper left-hand corner, we also have to acknowledge that what is worshipful is also what we want, is also what we want more is the stained glass window. The onus is not on the culture to be Christian. The onus is not on the culture to make it easier to grow church. If you're like, it's really hard in the culture today. Yes, we're not being beheaded, okay? It's hard. The onus is on the disciples to make disciples. And as the American culture becomes less and less Christian, the American church had better become more and more Christian. Yeah. We cannot count on the cultural drift anymore. I want to tell you a story. This is a picture of Beach Grove Church of the Brethren, Southern Ohio District. Little old country church where I grew up with 70 relatives. One Sunday, a guy named Rich Edwards came to church. He was not a relative. Gave his life to Jesus. Dramatic turnaround. I always heard this was possible, but I never really saw it. Sometime after that, Rich stood up in church and said God told him to buy a VW van. And maybe what he had to tell his wife. But God told him to buy a VW van and bring kids to a nice little white country church of 70 relatives. So he brought his friends' kids, he brought his neighbors' kids, he brought his extended family, I'm not kidding, by the dozen, sometimes make 2 trips. Some of the kids were handicapped, some of them came from rough backgrounds, some of them weren't socialized very well, none of them middle class, some of them weren't nice. I hated it. Because I was a well-dressed, well-behaved church kid. I knew how to get the strokes. Say Jesus. Yeah. I knew how to get the strokes. Okay. And what I would do is when these kids started coming, I didn't like it. I would say, these kids are not spiritually mature. Those of us in the church know the phrase spiritually mature. Sometimes means spiritually mature. It sometimes means, it's code language for not like me, and I don't want to say that. So I wanted more spiritually mature kids. So one kid was named Donald. He's my age, not like me, not spiritually mature. He was rough, he was annoying, but God through the church was making a real difference in Donald's life. Donald had a glass eye. Because when he was very young, I think about age 6, his older brother beat him in the face with a hammer.
Oh.
So one day in the summer, Donald wore a Jack Daniels t-shirt for a little white country church. I was very upset, righteously indignant. I asked Donald to get up, go out of the worship service, and step outside. "13-year-old me stood in front of Donald, between Donald and the door of the church. And I said, what do you think you're doing wearing that to church? He got defensive, of course. I yelled at him. I was, brokenhearted for Jesus that he didn't get it. And I left that encounter absolutely sure that I had done the right thing. I've never asked him how his week was. I never asked about his spiritual life. I never asked if our church helped him forgive his brother. So much for being a peacemaker, right? That was my shot. It didn't matter that he didn't have dress clothes. It didn't matter that he did believe in Jesus, and it didn't matter that he had been baptized. It didn't matter that he had no support from his parents or their own teacher. Now, was the t-shirt unnecessary? Of course the t-shirt was unnecessary, right? Was he doing it to get us fired up? Of course he was doing it to get us fired up. But I've learned something recently about teenagers is that they want desperately to be loved, and they will do things to try to make themselves unlovable. His behavior was unnecessary, but mine was wrong. He had the glass eye. I was blind. We didn't see much of Donald after that. A lot of those kids quit coming, and we went back to being a nice little white community church. Found Donald on Facebook. I'm trying to decide if I want that. So as I reflected about what a fool I was, I made a promise to myself and my God that I'm not going to stand in the way anymore. That time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a child that we put among them and said, truly I tell you, unless you change, become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such a child in my name welcomes me. Now that's the nice part. That'll go over well. Jesus is not done. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it will be better for you if a grain millstone. That's the big one. You're fastened around your neck and you will drown in the depths of the sea. That's a lot harder. If we are not careful, we will confuse our culture with God's kingdom. And when we do, we will police our values and our aesthetics and our thinking and our tools. And all those things which could help bring people into the kingdom become obstacles. I didn't think I was doing the wrong thing. I thought I was being the rock. I'm the pillar. By the way, nobody ever came, put their arm around me and said, son, nobody told me that. I didn't get the strokes, but I didn't get the correction either.
And I thought I was being a pillar, but my pillar was Donald's stumbling stone. And what Jesus says is that Donald's stumbling stone is my millstone.
That's true.
I want to show people the cornerstone.
Amen.
That's right.
Upon which God's kingdom is built, and upon we get to participate in it. We get to do it. Not just religious babysitting, but making an impact in the faith of the present and the next generation.
Amen.
All God's people said.
Amen.